So I am Jeff Ignatowski. Originally from right outside of Philadelphia, in Wilmington, Delaware. Is where I actually grew up. It's funny because I don't often tell people that. I only tell them right outside of Philly because nobody knows unless they get a credit card statement where Wilmington is. So it is the credit card capital of the world. About, I don't know, 25, 30 minutes outside of Philly. Um, but yeah, I'm originally from there. I have, oddly enough, I have a degree in culinary arts. I am a chef by trade, but I have done all kinds of stuff in the field of psychology for years and years. I worked for the Department of Juvenile Justice in Kentucky for some time, for about 15 years, and worked for the state doing that. I also worked for the county before that, working in a children's home as a counselor there. And so a lot of my psychological training comes from that, working with youth and really trying to understand why not only they got to be the way that they are, but why I got to be the way that I am. So a lot of my background and a lot of this stuff is very unique because it comes from a very personal place. So, and you know this pretty well, Andrew, because you talk to people all the time that are actually like killers, right? You interview them all the time. So you kind of get to see the inner workings, which is one of the reasons why the podcast is so unique. And, I got lucky in a lot of different areas in my life, and I didn't end up being on that side of the fence. So, you know, a lot of what my perspective ends up being is from that side, and understanding a lot of those racing thoughts, a lot of those feelings, a lot of those impulses that most normal people don't feel. I do. So it comes from a very personal perspective, and then understanding psychology is always helpful.
Very interesting. So when we meet in person, you'll have to not only teach me how to play your game, but you'll have to cook up a good steak or something like that.
Hell yeah, I'll make some jambalaya. I always love New Orleans cooking.
Nice, nice. So tell me about your book, what it's all about, and some of the people that you wrote about, and what people can expect to hear from the stories in there.
So the book is called Beyond the Headlines: True Crimes, Myths, and Legends. So one of the things that I really wanted to do is, I you mentioned it already. I created Killers the card game, and it was always a very unique endeavor to come up with something like that, to put out a game that is fairly controversial to begin with, and then jumping into the true crime, like writing end of things, and doing all of that. I wanted to put a unique spin on that as well. Like, I didn't want to just do the same old. And, there's so many books out there that are encyclopedias of different true crime figures. And then you have like the deep dives and some of my favorite authors that really talked to all of these killers, and they put down all these interviews and kind of dig into their past and everything. I wanted to keep it light enough that people could just pick it up and read it kind of fast. But I also wanted them to be able to get something out of it. So there is a heavy, heavy focus in the book on critical thinking, and I am a huge fan of critical thinking and making people really look at things from a different perspective. Because I think that in this culture in which we live in, that we often lose that, and we kind of become lemmings. And I don't want people to continue to do that. And in true crime, we do that a lot, right? We hear all the stories, we believe all the things that somebody has told us, or some documentary has done their research, right? And we all know that all of that shit comes from their own personal perspective. It may be good information, it may not be, right? So they get thousands and millions of dollars to produce these documentaries that come up with this new slant on, whether it's the connections between Gacy and Dean Coral, or that the Sons of Sam, or any one of the number of Zodiac documentaries out there. None of them have all of the information. They're all interesting, but they all come from their own slant. So I took a conscious effort with this book to really step outside of that, to give people information and to not necessarily give them answers. Because I think it's important to start research and to jump in there and figure it out for yourself. What is it that you believe about this? Where does your research take you? And so it really is, the book itself is the beginning of that. It's not the end. I don't give the answers. I make a lot of theories, and I make a lot of ideas, and maybe I bring some things to light, but I really leave it to the readers to dig in more. And I give them some resources at the end of each chapter. There is, kind of a further reading section, which gives them some direction to go into looking for more information, some more resources for them, because it's important to not just let it end. It's not my opinion. It's not Jimmy Smith's opinion. It doesn't make any difference. You have to dig in. You have to jump in with both feet. And if you want to understand the truth, you need to be willing to realize that some of your ideas may not be right. That 6 months from now, they may find a different piece of DNA somewhere, or something that changes all of our opinions on any of these people. So, whether it's finding more bodies, more victims, or maybe it wasn't them at all. We always have to leave room for that too, because maybe they are innocent. We don't know. We weren't there. But all we can do is dig in and really try to actively search for the truth. So really, that's what I tried to do with the book. Some of the people in there, you've got, we start out with Elizabeth Bathory. I did for the first book, we started with 10 different serial killers. And I say that kind of loosely because Ed Gein is in there, and so is Lizzie Borden, right? Neither one at the time could be considered serial killers, right? Lizzie Borden was acquitted. Ed Gein only killed two people that we know of for sure. And at the time, well, at his time, there wasn't even the term serial killer. But when there was a classification, it was, three or more, not two or more. So now he would technically be considered a serial killer, or could be. Uh, I don't know that he necessarily qualifies. I guess maybe he would have if he found someone else interesting, but we don't know that for sure. He also may have just dug in graves until the day he died, you know. But yeah, we talk about a lot of that. I end the book with Dennis Rader, who is, some of you out there know that I communicate a little bit with Dennis. And so he actually helped me with some of that. There are some parts in there that directly come from him. The very one of the things that I wanted to do with the book, uh, you you remember that old game that we used to play, the two lies and a truth?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of the format for the book. I did three myths and a legend. And so we go through these different myths, which are not necessarily true or false. They're just, this is what people believe about these people. Here's the information. Make your own decision. And so the legend that we pulled for BTK uh, came directly from him, because I asked Ashley if she could ask him for me what he would want me to cover. And so he said the good thing, or the thing that he would like to see, is the theory that he was the Zodiac, because he's been questioned several times in conjunction with the Zodiac case. A lot of it has to do with the fact that some of the letters and things have a similar kind of tone to them. Because, I mean, let's face it, Dennis is pretty narcissistic. Many of the Zodiac letters were very narcissistic. And so they kind of line up a little bit with the way that he later on interacted with the police. But they did. They've questioned him three or four times on it. And so I go and talk a lot about that in the end of the book.
So this next question, you might be long-winded, and feel free to take pauses anytime you want. But since your book is about myths and legends, can you talk about some myths and legends of different infamous murderers? They don't necessarily have to be serial killers, and they don't necessarily have to be in your book. But for instance, like the correlation between Dean Corll and John Wayne Gacy, or any other killers that you have heard of out there, whether they are myths or legends, or there is some truth to it and some lies to it.
Yeah, I think some of that we already mentioned because I mentioned the whole idea of the sons of Sam, right? There's a belief, and Berkowitz is not covered in the book yet because there will be later editions. I left it that way on purpose because I wanted to dive back in. I picked 10 of the more well-known killers that people were very familiar with, and killers that people think they know the whole story, right? And would be surprised to find out, like, oh my God, I thought that was true. Well, it may not be. So yeah, Berkowitz is one that it may not just have been him that committed the murders, that there may have been the satanic cult that was doing it, and it may have been many people, possibly across the country, that were doing similar crimes. That's one that I would be interested in diving into a little bit deeper. I already mentioned the BTK one. The Dean Corll, John Wayne Gacy one is very interesting to me. And I'll tell you this, I was really surprised. H. Holmes has always been the one that I've always been really, I thought was fascinating, the whole story. I love the 1800s kind of grifter kind of guy. And so I always thought that was really fascinating. But when I was doing all the research for the book, the two stories that I really, really dug into ended up being Gacy and Dahmer. And I thought that I knew a lot about those cases. And I found out that there was a lot of stuff that I didn't really understand. And so Gacy is just fascinating to me. I'm friends with Bob Motta Jr., and I'm friends with oh William Dorsch, who is the police whistleblower. And so those two are currently teaming up to like look for more bodies that Gacy may have buried. Right. So I have been intensely fascinated with that, and knowing a lot of the back history and the people that are involved, I think may have helped my interest in that because I think it's fascinating. I also don't think that Corll or Gacy had any connection. They may have had a similar supplier. There is one guy, and I can't remember his name right now, but both Gacy and Corll knew him. He was definitely had something to do with the sex ring and with young men involved with that. But I'm from what David. Oh my goodness, no, Elmer Wayne Henley, the one that shot and killed Corll. From
Mhm.
what he said in prison, he says that Gacy and Corll never met, and he never met Gacy at all. So I don't think that there was any real connection there. It may have been like second or third hand, but I think that that's a fascinating thing to discuss. I did not cover that in the book, and that's probably something that I would leave if I decide to do a chapter on Dean Corll. Another thing that I'm really interested in, and I'll let you know there. This was initially going to be one book in three parts. And when I got about halfway through, and I was at chapter 5, and I think I was like 4,000 words or something into it, and I realized that there was no way that this was going to be one book, that I was going to have to break it up into three volumes. And so we've done that, and volume 2 is going to be on criminals, and I've already started working on it. The very first chapter is on Billy the Kid, and I haven't gotten to the first myth, but the first myth is that he was left-handed. And so we'll talk a little bit about him being left-handed. I'll talk about why that came up and why we know that that's not true. And most people know that that's not true at this point, but several movies that were made early on all purported that he was a left-handed shooter. Uh, he wasn't. But yeah, that's where we're starting out with that. Then we'll get into one of my favorite subjects, and that I will probably be very long-winded on. Uh, I might have to shorten myself. There's going to be a lot of editing when it comes to that. But I love the mafia, and we'll talk about Lucky Luciano, John Gotti, Richard Kuklinski will come up all in that. And, kind of the beginning of the American mafia, the end of the American mafia, and then one of the, you know, possibly maybe a whole bunch of bullshit, but one of the more prolific hitmen in the mafia, who oddly enough wasn't even Italian. He's a Polak like me, but you know, somebody that they used all the time, and may or may not have been there at the Paul Castellano hit. So there's all kinds of talk about that. So we'll dive into that. We'll finish up with oh the last chapter in the second book, the second volume, is on Jeffrey Epstein. So we'll be talking about some more current events and talking about that because it's about criminals. And I'm sure that I'll get into talking about the different theories of his death. And, uh, was it the Clintons? Was it not? There'll be all kinds of things that I'll bring up there. And then the third volume is going to be on cults and religions. And as typical me, I have never felt like I should pull any punches with anybody, and I will throw shade at everyone because that's just who I am. I don't give a shit. And if I think that there's something to talk about, I think it should be out there. So we'll talk about, the Mormons. We'll talk about the FLDS. We'll talk about some of the cults there. We'll talk about Heaven's Gate, of course, Jim Jones, some of the common ones that we talk about. But I also want to get into the Catholic Church. I want to talk about the Jehovah's Witnesses. Uh, I don't know why I didn't think of this before, but if I'm going to talk about the Catholic Church, I can't leave out Anton LaVey and Satanism, or Aleister Crowley and occultism. And so all of that is going to be encompassed in that last volume. And the other two books are 10 chapters apiece. The final volume will be 15 chapters, and we'll cover many cults in there. Well, 15 different cults or religions, because again, I really want to dig into that and really talk about all the deep and dark and dirty shit that could possibly be out there, and really get people to think like, why? Uh, for I don't know if they're slated for this. They might be, but Nexium is a fascinating cult to me. The fact that Keith Raniere was able to get all of these people into this like success cult, and to do all these crazy things with now like raising almost a militia, and bringing all these women in that he could then use as his farm system to rape and brand women. It's amazing to me that somebody like Raniere could do that, and we're not talking about 40 years ago, right? This shit just happened like 10 years ago. So, I think it's fascinating to look into all of that stuff and to understand why people could fall into some of that.
So speaking of cults, and I'm asking you for a reason because my favorite case is the Narco Satanico case. Will you be covering that? Because I talked to Sarah Aldretti exclusively. I don't think anybody else speaks to her. So if you ever want any inside information that aren't on the murders, because she won't talk about the murders, but on the actual cult, I would definitely be, willing to work with you on that. And I'm curious if you're going to cover that case.
That is definitely, I should probably, I should probably look uh, what I have in there. I might even have it on my phone here. Maybe. Let me see if I have the list, and I'll tell you exactly what it is. Let's see. No, it's deleted. Oh man, that stinks. Uh, I'll have to go in there. I'll let you know if they are or not. So I end up talking about them a lot because often, like, the regular fans of true crime have no idea who they are, right? And because it's, something that comes from South America, and people just don't understand, like, that it's a worldwide thing. Like, it happens all over the place. And the stuff that they were doing is wild. The fact that he was like a male model, and
Mhm.
was running like basically like a drug trafficking gang, is just wild. Like how the whole thing played out, and that they had the ganga and all kinds of stuff there. And so I'm always interested in that. So I would love to work with you on that. Matter of fact, I was at a show probably 4 or 5 months ago now, and a kid came up, and he was like, he saw that I had it out because somebody had flipped the pages to the Colts, and he was like walking by the booth, and he saw Adolfo and Sarah's card, and he said, "Oh my God!" And he stops, and he looks at me, and he says, "Uh." "Oh, that you have them in the game?" I said, "Yeah, I have them in the Colts expansion." And he said, uh, my grandfather's godson was killed by Adolfo. Uh, Most of the murders happened right outside of our compound in Mexico. And he was like, dude, I got to take a picture. And he sent him to his brother right there when we were standing there because his brother is still down there and still lives in Mexico. And it was wild to get that firsthand experience with somebody that was directly affected by all of what happened down there.
That's crazy. Are you able to say who the godson was? Was it Kilroy?
I don't know. He didn't tell me. He didn't
Okay.
tell me a name, so I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I always tell people that the Narcos Satanicos is like literally the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but in Mexico, like they were not only what you said, but drug traffickers, they were a cult, they were serial killers, they were just demented people, and all of them were. And it's crazy because Little Seraphin, I'm sure you know who he is. He led them to all the bodies and everything. And if you watch the new
Yeah,
documentary on the Narcos Satanicos, they were like putting guns to his head and being like, "Oh, is this funny now? Is this funny now?" Like I don't know if you've seen it, but Sarah Aldretti actually shouted me out in that documentary because I sell some of her stuff from time to time, which I thought was
yeah,
pretty funny.
yeah. It's crazy. I need to watch that one again. I think I've watched it already, but I need to watch it again because that was the newer one that came out, right?
Yeah, yeah. They
Yeah,
they exclusively interviewed Sarah and a lot of the former law enforcement and like reporters and stuff like that. And I actually talked to the woman who produced the entire thing, like put the entire thing together, and she's a really nice woman. But yeah, Sarah calls me like once a week and we talk about anything and everything. She's always sending me paintings and signatures and stuff like that because I don't collect much murderabilia anymore. But when I do, it's the Narco Satanicos case, exclusively Sarah Aldretti, because people say her art sucks, but I think it's amazing. I mean, especially the cult related art. I mean, you're not going to get that. You can get cult related art from non-cult members and random murderers or serial killers or whatever, but getting it from the source directly that was there when they were doing these atrocities is just like, wow, this is crazy.
yeah, for sure. She's wild, man. Uh, I can only imagine some of those conversations. Uh, yeah. Anyway, we'll have to talk about that at some point because I would love some insight.
Oh yeah, definitely. I would love to bring her on board if she's willing to be on board. She's a really paranoid person. Like when I did my interview with her in English, she cut it short by like an hour because she's like, "Oh, my friend, the phone isn't working. I gotta go. I gotta go. I'll talk to you later." And I didn't talk to her for 2.5 years after that because she got so paranoid because I asked her about witchcraft, and that's when she started to get real uneasy. And I don't know why. I don't know why. I mean, she talked
Huh.
about it in the documentary, but I don't know why she felt so uneasy with me. Maybe because I'm an American and I don't understand her culture or whatever, but I still don't know. She
Yeah.
still hasn't told me why. Whenever I ask her, she just is like, "Oh, let's talk about something else."
Oh, that's weird. Yeah, it probably is. I would assume that it probably is something cultural because that, the whole idea of all of that is very a very cultural it's very rooted in who they are as people. And so it's just like when you look at like all of the Native American religions and stuff are very much rooted in who they are as people, and it is directly related to how they present themselves to the world. So, when you have somebody like that, being able to share that with outsiders is almost never done, right? And so I could see where that could be difficult for her because, we're not from her culture. So it's, we're seen as outsiders that are not able or not capable of handling that kind of revelation. So it's interesting.
Right. A friend of mine who speaks Spanish and understands Spanish when it's spoken, he sent me an interview that she did, and it was like an hour and a half to 2 hours long in Spanish. And I asked Sarah, I'm like, why did you do an interview with this reporter for like 2 hours, but you only gave me like 10 minutes? And she's like, well, my friend, I feel more comfortable talking in Spanish and my English isn't that good and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense, I guess, because she does struggle with some writing and reading in English and speaking English at that, obviously, since it's her second language. But I just need to learn Spanish, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, so this next question is probably subjective and opinion based, but I'm curious about your opinion. Why do you think everybody's fascinated with serial killers and serial killer culture to the point where professionals believe it's deemed unhealthy, when we consume so much true crime?
I think that's funny. I actually wrote an article about that because there were all those pop-ups popping up on Facebook and shit about, all the clickbait about, 9 out of 10 psychologists or psychiatrists say that if you watch more than an hour of true crime, then you need to seek help. And I really think that that's all bullshit. Uh, I don't necessarily think it's unhealthy. I think that it's unhealthy not to. I think that when we hide things and we don't uh, dive deeper into who we are as people, because we all struggle with different feelings and different impulses. And what happens is when we hide those things, when we try to get rid of those, uh, they end up coming out in all kinds of horrible ways, right? It's the same thing when you see all the people that are super sexually repressed, right? And then later on, it comes out that they're doing all kinds of terrible things with whoever and whatever, right? I think that if we try to hide all that stuff, it becomes a serious problem. So understanding it, not necessarily feeding into it and feeding that monster is a very healthy thing to do. So I think a lot of people get into it because they want to understand why, right? That's always the question that we hear is, how could somebody do something like that? Why would they go to those lengths? Why would they kill those people? And so it's like such a common question because going out and murdering other people for profit or for some kind of sexual desire is foreign to most people. Even though they walk around thinking about, I want to kill my boss or I'd like to run that person over with my car. We think about all that shit all the time. But it's a different thing to think about it and to fantasize about it a little bit than to do it. There's a gulf of difference between the two of those. And I often talk about, like when I do my talks and stuff, that, everybody, given the right circumstances, would kill, right? We all have it in us to do that, whether it is for self-preservation because someone is harming us, whether it is, protecting what is ours, whether they're stealing something from us or somebody is coming in to harm our family. We would kill for those things. If we got to a place where we had nothing and we had to fight to survive, or, there was no food coming and we had to steal or kill to get that food. There are two types of people. Some people would go out and they would fight and kill for it. There are other people that would just go into a corner and quietly die themselves. I've never been one of those people, right? If it came down to it and I had to do something, I would go and do it because as narcissistic as it sounds, my self-preservation trumps anybody else's. Uh, but I think that that is the big question that everybody asks. Like I already mentioned, that has never been the question that I've asked. So it's always been different for me. I've always tried to understand like why I have never crossed the line, or why I haven't crossed the line yet. Right? That has always been the question to me. So doing everything with the card game, with writing the book, with doing all the talks that I do, for me, it's very cathartic because I get to explore all of these things and I get a much, much better understanding of them. And for me, that's very helpful because I understand myself better and I understand what is okay for me to do and what is not okay for me to do. There are certain things that I personally struggle with that I know that that is not a safe direction for me to go. So I stay away from that. Some people it's drinking, right? They realize that, if they start drinking, they're not going to stop. So they stay away from that. Some people it's drugs. They know that, hey, I can smoke weed from time to time, but if I do anything harder than that, it's going to be a real problem for me. Some people it's sex, right? They go out there and they're like, hey, if I go out to the clubs, I'm fucking everybody. And, they just don't go out to the clubs, right? So, there are certain things for me that are really interesting. Like I have a mask collection downstairs. I love masks. I always have. I don't wear them because I find that it is too easy for me to disassociate. So it is very, very rare that you will ever see me with something covering my face. I'll do it for like Halloween or for like a costume contest or something. But I was at a show this last year. It was really strange. I was there at Fear Expo, and they had a costume contest there. And my buddy was in a pogo costume. He fucking looks like Gacy. He's the same height, same weight. When he puts on the clown makeup, it's uncanny, man. I'll have to show you some photos. It's wild.
All right.
But we were out doing that, and I was wearing my clown costume that has a mask with it. And we were out there doing the whole thing, and I realized about halfway through that I was starting to really struggle, and I was starting to not talk to people. I was starting to get real quiet and wanting to be by myself. And I'm in a crowded room, and that's not normally how I am. I'm usually talking to everybody. And I looked at him and I said, dude, I got to take this off. I got to be done for a while. And he looked at me real funny, and I told him why. And he was like, take that shit off right now, Jeff. He was like, you need to not do that. And I said, you're right. So I did, and I relaxed, and I felt fine after that. But there are certain things that I have been very good at being self-aware about, which many of the people that we talk to are not, right? They don't have that self-awareness. They can't step back from the ledge. They always have to cross over it, right? And I think that that is the one main thing that has stopped me from going any further, is that I do have that. I do understand that. I have a sense of loss. And I know that, like, hey, I have a healthy fear of incarceration, right? I worked as a corrections officer for some time, and it's like I don't want to be on the other side of that.
Right.
I don't want to live in there with all of those people. I'm fine right where I am, and there are certain things that could very easily get me into that place, and I don't want to do those things. So I don't know if I even answered any of that question.
Oh
Maybe.
yeah, I think you did in a roundabout way. Yeah. So another question I get a lot of the time is it's questions slash comments like why humanize murderers? Why humanize serial killers? They took lives, this and that. They're atrocious people. And like Dr. Catherine Ramsland said last week, someone asked her that question live and she just kind of was like, because they're human? What are you talking about? And I think there's a difference between humanizing serial killers and murderers and glamorizing them. Like my interviews, I don't necessarily think I'm glamorizing them by any means. I think I'm bringing their stories to life and like kind of like going off of your book, putting myths and legends to rest. Like for instance, I interviewed Tina Monroe, formerly known as James Monroe, Bill Bonnen's only co-defendant that's living, and she now was in the same predicament as Wayne Henley was at one point. She was going to become a victim, but instead of becoming a victim, she convinced Bill Bonnen to let him at the time participate in a murder, which was Stephen J. Wells, and then after that she went on the run and he was looking for her and they ended up getting busted and now she's doing 15 to life, I believe, for second degree murder. And like, what do you think of that? What do you think of humanization versus glorification? Do you think that's the same thing, or do you think that's totally different?
No, I think they're completely different. I think that there are people that do. There are certainly people out there that glorify. You know, I struggle with the people that are, you know, in love with Ramirez or in love with Dahmer, and you know, that I think there's a line there, and that can be problematic. But I think that the majority, like I know for myself, uh, this is all history, right?
Mhm.
And I have a huge issue when people are like, well, you're glorifying this and you're glorifying that. No, the stories are important, right? If we forget what happened and we let all of that history disappear, then it will continue to happen. We will also not have people that are able to dig into all of this stuff and create better and more programs and better forensics, and so it will continually get bad. You know, you just can't sweep it under the carpet and think that it's just going to disappear, because people have serious issues out there. If we don't investigate that stuff and we don't see it for what it is, we will never be able to get them the help that they need. Because you know, you look at Dahmer. Dahmer is a good example. He is someone that, yes, he was really fucked up. Really bad shit happened because of what he did. But if we were more educated and we could have gotten him help, he may have never done any of that stuff,
Mhm.
right? He needed some really serious, intensive therapy that could have curbed some of those desires, maybe helped him through some of the trauma that he was dealing with from his childhood. And you know, I think that if we if we don't do that and we don't recognize those things, we fail those people around us, and then there will be more of that. So, you know, whether it's with the card game or with the book, it is really bringing awareness to the stories. Those stories are vitally important in where we go as a society. And I see far too much of people just kind of putting their head in the sand and ignoring things, or because they feel like it might offend someone else, they want to ignore it. That is a really, really dangerous place to be. And even though they think that it makes a better society, often it makes a much more dangerous society, because then we start looking the other way. And then there's all kinds of nasty shit that happens behind our back that we don't want. We want to pretend like it's not there. So, so I think it's dangerous to not look at that, not understand it for what it is. I think it's also dangerous to glorify those people and to deify them like they're something special, because they're not. They were all pieces of shit that went out there and hurt countless lives. That is not okay. But forgetting them is a mistake.
Right, I agree 100%. And glorifying them actually in turn, produces like mass murderers, copycat killers like the New York Zodiac, Jack the Stripper, and so many countless other copycat killers that are out there. It's just amazing how many people don't know about all these copycat killers that exist to this day.
Yeah. So I got another game that I just released, and actually, it's funny you mentioned Catherine, because me and Catherine talked beforehand, and I asked for her help on some of the CSI portion of the game, and so she gave me a bunch of resources and stuff to use to look at that, and so so she had not really a direct hand in it, but as far as the background material and stuff, a lot of that came from her. And of course, you know, she's kind of the authority on all of that anyway. But Uh, but yeah, it was really interesting that at some point, one of the things I want to enter into the game is some of the copycat stuff, because I think it'll be really interesting for people to have to pick out, like, how do I figure that out? Like, as an investigator, how do I look at a crime scene and understand if it's maybe a copycat or if it is linked with the same killer? And I think that those lines are very blurred. I think it's very difficult to tell that. But, um, I think it'll really challenge people to think about it and really look critically into those pieces of evidence that are there, because I think a lot of the misconception, because we watch shows like CSI and Law and Order and all that shit, is that all of this stuff is laid out in a nice, neat little row, and it's really easy to figure out all these crimes in an hour, and that is horseshit, right? Like these crimes that happen, there are years and years and years of evidence that are collected, that are put up on the shelf, that they don't go back and look at, and somebody else comes along and there's a little bit better forensics and now they get new information. It's why all of these cold cases end up getting solved, because things change over time, and preservation is such an important thing, because we don't get it right the first time. So I think it's really fascinating.
Speaking of cold cases being solved, I actually just did an interview with Krista Watkins, a granddaughter of a murder victim here in Tacoma, Washington. And what's crazy is I did an interview like 2.5, 3 years ago with Cecil Davis, who's now classified as a serial killer. And in a roundabout way, he confessed to the murder of her grandmother, and the Tacoma Police Department heard it, and they're like, "Wait, play this back, play this back, play this back again, play this back again. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Did you hear that?" And they ended up closing the case after they had DNA on file, and they heard a partial
Wow.
confession. So it was kind of cool being involved in a 30-year-old cold case that got solved. And I'm like, I would have never thought in a million years that an interview I did with some no-name killer would help solve a case. You know what I mean? Like it's still
Yeah,
mind-blowing to this day.
that's wild. I know that last time we talked, like we were on one of these things, we were talking about that you couldn't release any information at the time because it was all still in process. That's super cool, man. And I think often that's what makes it all worth it, right? When we're able to like really see the effect that we are putting in, like by bringing light to all of these different things. I think it's super worthwhile when things like that happen. And now families are able to get at least a little bit of closure on what happened to their loved one because of that. How many stories do we see now that it's like the armchair detectives that are really, coming to a lot of the conclusions that, maybe the police are too close to the case. Maybe they're too biased, and not necessarily in a negative way, but everybody has bias. So when you're able to step outside of that and you have a much more impartial party, you're able to look at things from a different angle and maybe see some things that other people didn't. And I think it's really cool that we're getting to a place where, some of the podcasts and some of the lay people are helping out with some of these cases, and that the police are actually accepting some of their theories and their ideas to give a fresh spin on these different cases that they haven't figured out yet. I think it's super cool.
Yeah, definitely. And a case going off of that is the West Memphis Three, which we won't talk about because we could talk about that for hours or days on end, but there's so many theories in there. Did this person do it? Did the West Memphis Three do it? Did Bojangles do it? Did a truck driver serial killer do it? I mean, there's, take your pick on what theory there is out there on that case. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So I know you talked a little bit about the game, but could you go into a little in depth about it? I know we did an interview in the past, which is now buried below all these episodes. Talk about the game and the expansion packs and how you came to create that and what it's all about.
So, Killer's the card game was my original creation. We came out in 2021. So now it's been like 3 years that the game has been out there. It has been incredible for this very niche game that, it it's really been fascinating to me because I really believed when I first came out with it that I was going to go to my first convention and they were going to throw me the fuck out. They're going to be like, "You got to go, like get the fuck out of here." You know, I got this this sign with like with all the different expansions on it, and oh, Dorothea Puente
Hmm.
was on there, and John Gotti, and Ted Bundy, and Jeffrey Dahmer, and everything are all up on the banner behind me, and I'm thinking, dude, somebody's going to tell me to leave. Like, people are going to get pissed off. They're going to line up at my booth and they're going to be like, you got to get out of here. They're going to, like, I felt like it was like the old wrestling days where they're going to beat the fuck out of me in the parking lot and take me to the emergency room, and that has never happened. And I'm like, I'm always astounded to this day. I'm astounded that doesn't happen because you know, there are some people that take a strong stance. I just did a show in Columbus. Not It's a bigger gaming show, and I had some people walk past the booth like, oh, and then I had the best show that I've ever done. I sold more games there than I ever have, and people loved it. And so it's always amazing to me that that is the response that I get. Of course, there's always some naysayers out there and people that find it distasteful. But Killers itself, I really created for two reasons. I wanted people to have awareness of how many of these people are around us all the time, right? It never stops. They're still there, even though we catch some of them. But currently, there are close to 600 killers in the full game, spanning five expansions. I have a sixth one on the way if I can ever get my ass in gear to finish it because it's partially done. But that sixth expansion will be coming out. But Killers itself is a cross between D&D and Magic, where you get a stable of five killers. Yes, you play as the killer. And I did that on purpose because I wanted people to have a safe space to be able to understand some of those things, to understand the killers themselves better, and to like drop into that, right? That's why I made it an RPG. I wanted to give people that place to do it. And so, some people may find that difficult, uh, but I like that it challenges some things. I like that there is a lot of very, very dark humor in the game. And so you take your five killers, and your goal is to get 10 kills or be the last killer standing. So over those five people, you have to try to kill 10 people. Whoever does that first wins the game. But you are constantly avoiding the police, managing the evidence that you might leave at the different crime scenes, and managing the other players that are playing because they can do all kinds of stuff to you too. So once you get like to the expansions, because we have organized crime, world of serial killers, lady killers, cults, and mass murderers was the most recent one that I released. They're all a little bit different, obviously with different focuses. But cults and mass murderers plays completely different than the other three expansions. In the cults expansion, you're trying to create your cult from one of 10, and then you have to meet their win conditions. So, for example, the Narco Satanists are in there. They're in there, but for them, I'm trying to think of what they have to do to win. I know that they have to create an Nganga to win the game. So they have to collect body parts and some different things to put in the Nganga. And then I can't remember. I think they have to get a certain number of cult following, and then they win the game as long as they create the Nganga. But there's also the Children of God that are in there, and David Berg. And so for David Berg to win the game, there are STD tokens in the game, and he has to spread STDs to get his cult members. And then he has to marry four children to win the game because that's what David did in real life, right? Before he was arrested and thrown in prison. But, we try to keep it as real as possible, but also add some humor in there because it is a very, very heavy subject and it is very like true to life. Like you can get killed in a drive-by, you can throw people in a wood chipper, all kinds of things. You can shoot people in the face with cyanide mist like Kuklinski. So, we wanted to keep it really true to life. And so the mass murderers expansion, when that came out, the mass murderers are actually the victims in the game, but when you draw them out of the pile, they then have a whole bunch of special things that they can do, and they can kill everybody. So you
Mhm.
have to kill them before they kill everybody else. And kind of my inspiration for that expansion was our government in the 60s using the mafia to try to kill Fidel Castro. So I kind of took that kind of, hey, the mafia guys are going to be the secret agents. Well, in the game, the serial killers are the secret agents, and they're trying to get rid of all of the mass murderers. The next expansion that I release is called The Experts and the Accomplices. And so that is going to add a whole bunch of new elements to the game. There are going to be power ups and power downs. There are going to be certain characters that can give your team bonuses or keep you out of jail or get you out of jail. Like Johnny Cochran will be able to get you out of jail. There will be prosecuting attorneys that will be able to put other people in jail. There might be a few good cops, maybe some dirty cops that can do certain things. There's going to be podcasters in there and authors that'll be able to give your team special bonuses or deduct things from other teams. There will also be the accomplices in there, and we'll have Wayne Henley will be in there. And at some point, if Dean Coral is in the game and a certain thing happens, he'll be able to shoot and kill Dean Coral and remove him from the game. Um, David Cram will also be in there. Michael Rossi will be in there. So really drawing from all of that. I also want to put uh, David Parker Ray's girlfriend. I can never remember her
Cynthia
name.
Hendy.
There you go. I want to put her in the game. So she'll be there and she could procure some victims quite easily for old David. And so, really trying to round it out a little bit. We'll also add some new killers to the game that I haven't added yet. There are a couple people that I'm really interested in putting in there that have some accomplices so that I can finally add them to the game. But yeah, that's the new stuff coming up for killers. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I've always loved the concept of the game, and I've seen people share your statuses from time to time that are in groups and like, this man is so sick, I can't believe he's doing this and profiting off of this. But I think it's just such closed-minded people that don't really know what they're looking at, and they're looking at one side of it and not completely. Because if Dr. Catherine Ramsland is working with you, that just goes to show you like this is, based off of human psychology. Like, she would never work with anybody that would be, it would be detrimental to victims, family members, or victims in general. So I think that's a
Well,
big pat on the back for you that she's working with you on that.
so that was one of the things that was really important to me. In killers, we don't the victim. I always try to figure out how to say this because there's really no good way to say it. Uh, in the context of the game, the victims are not important, right? In life, the victims are vitally important.
Of course.
But as far as the game is concerned, there are no like real victims in the game. That's not what's important. The important part is the history and the criminals themselves, right? And so, not to glorify them, but to highlight the stories and the hundreds of stories that most of us have never heard, right? There are so many people, we all know about Bundy and Dahmer and all of that stuff. But like when we start talking, even Dean Coral, most people don't know who that is. They don't know that he was very, very similar in what he did compared to Gacy. Everybody knows who Gacy was, but very few people know about Coral. When you start talking about, well, just about anybody else, there's like a big 12 that everybody knows. And then everybody else are like, oh, I've never heard of that case before. And I think the cases themselves are very important. That's why we put the little bios on the back of all the cards, because I want people to dig in and to understand this stuff and see the history for what it is. So yeah, I think the people that say those things often don't understand it. They want to take it for face value instead of understanding something deeper. But I think that that is a systemic problem in our culture, that we often take things at face value and don't do the real work to understand things. And so here's something that's really crazy, and I don't know that I've told you this yet, or maybe we did talk about this, but just recently. I was at a show in Evansville, Indiana, and Scott Innes was there, and he is the voice of Scooby Doo and Scrappy Doo, right? He also just did that wrestling movie. He was the announcer in oh my goodness, about the brothers, and I can never think of the
Oh,
name of
Jeff
that
Hardy,
movie.
Matt Hardy.
No, 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 about the oh my goodness, oh why can't I think of them? Uh, guys, I guess they were in Texas.
Hmm.
Um, it's just recent. This movie just came out 6 months ago. Uh, oh, why can't I think of the name of that movie? Anyway, it was really good. He was the announcer. He did a great job of that movie. Scott's a really great guy. So I was at this convention with Scott, and his like he had a girl there with him, and she came up to the booth, and Scott came up to the booth and was like, "Hey, she needs to talk to you." I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." So she comes up to the booth, and she looks at me, and she says, "Oh my God, I don't know why I haven't heard of you before." And I was like, "Okay, uh, is there a reason why you would have?" And she was like, "You're probably not going to believe this. But I work with Scott and I do stuff with him. I go to the conventions because it kind of like centers me from my regular job." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, what's your regular job?" She was like, "Well, I work for the Department of Homeland Security." And I looked at her and I said, "I'm glad you haven't heard of me. That's good. I don't want you to have heard of me because that could be bad." And she was like, "No, no, no, it's not like that." She said, "I work for the Human Trafficking Division." And I was like, "Well, I'm really glad you haven't heard of me. That means I haven't done anything terrible." I'm like, geez. And so she was like, "Oh my God, I love this." So she like calls her lieutenant on the phone and comes up there, and they buy killers, right? They have it, and they are currently using it. They've got like a staff of like 12 people down there in like Baton Rouge, right? Is where that division is, and they all use killers to like train and to work through stuff. And I was just like, I was blown away when they were telling me that that's what they wanted to use it for. And I'm like, this is wild that, that we've gone from like this little gaming, very niche gaming company for people that like love true crime. And now like it's being used in college classes. There is a school district in Milwaukee that wants to pick up the game for their true crime classes. And so it like has taken on this huge like educational element to it, which I love because I've always been an educator. So, like, I love to do that. And, you know, I really give a lot of credit for all of that stuff. John Borowski, who is like the guy who really got me involved. And so I probably told this story on the first interview that we did, but like when we first released on Kickstarter, he was like one of like the last week of the project, he bought a copy, and I knew who he was. And when I saw his name come through, I thought, oh shit, if like I get another 50 backers because John just bought this game, like I'm in deep shit because right at that point, my publisher told me that they were not, or my printer told me that they were not going to print the cards. And so I didn't know how the fuck I was going to even release the game at all. And so the first like 45, 50 units were all hand done by me. So John has the very first, actually, he has the second hand done set because I kept one for myself. But yeah, like I like printed those out. I bought like a $900 printer. I printed them all out myself. It was linen paper, cardstock, and linen paper. I glued all those fuckers myself. I cornered them, and so it was like that first set. I'm super proud of because like if I would have just left it up to them, the game would have never released. We would have never done anything that we're doing now. And then later on, me and John met at a convention. We were at Dark History Con, which is getting ready to come up soon. And if you all are in Illinois, you should go to that con. It's great. Brian, who runs it, is amazing. But we were at that convention together, and John says, hey, I'm doing this. Are you coming in on the panel? And I was like, I don't think so. And he was like, why not? I was like, I don't know. Nobody asked me to. But he was doing the serial killer culture panel. And of course, he's pretty famous from doing, he had a show, he still has a show called Serial Killer Culture TV. And so he puts me on stage with him. And it was John Borowski, myself in the middle, and Steve Gianangelo on the other side of me.
Nice.
And for those of you that are in the know, Steve basically wrote the book on the psychology. Well, didn't basically, he did write the book on the psychology of the serial murderer, right? Fantastic book. If you get a chance, check it out. He's got a second one out now, but just really, really great resource material, which I still use to this day when I give all my talks. But Steve, and I'm sitting in the middle of these two guys, and I'm like, I'm sitting there with a serial killer vest on and my skin hat, sitting between like the number one true crime documentarian out there and the guy that literally wrote the book. And I'm like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, why am I on this panel? Like, I know nothing. And so we do the panel. It goes really well. I talk a whole bunch, and John and Steve are like, dude, anytime you want to get on a panel with us, feel free. You come up here and do it. I was like, all right. So we happen to be at a convention together like a month or two later, and we're at this convention together, and we all end up on stage, and it's John, Ashley Keto, myself, Joe Hiles, and Steve Gianangelo, and we're all up on the stage together. And so we do this whole talk, and I end up being like the moderator for this talk, and it ends up going really well. And then after that, it was like a no-brainer that I would needed to go back up on stage. And for those of you that don't know my background, I pastored for over 10 years, right? I was on stage speaking to people 2 or 3 times a week for 10 years. And so when I left all of that and I moved, my life changed dramatically. And I left all of that. There was a kind of a void for me. And I was always looking for something and a platform to get up there and talk again. And then when John and Steve put me up on stage with them, I realized what that was. And so I was like, okay, I guess I have a platform again. And it's time to really go out there and just, do what I've always done best. And then all of that happened. And then the book came out of that. And, I don't often talk about this either, but this is not the first time I've worked on a book. This is actually my fourth book. But none of those other books ever came to light. So none of them, like I would start writing them and it just wasn't what needed to happen. So I never got any further. There are lots of manuscripts that ended up in the trash from fiction stuff that I had written to lots of nonfiction books. And so I just kind of threw those all away. But it was really the true crime that made it really easy for me. Beyond the headlines, I wrote in 3 weeks. So it was just, it was there. It was time to go. And so I did it. And it's just been incredible. And then the response that I've had so far has been fucking wild to me, right? I'm currently number one in hot new releases on Amazon in our category. I am, last time I checked about an hour ago, I was number two on the bestseller list on Amazon in our category, and I was number 13 on the true crime hot new releases uh, on Amazon. And I'm like, how the hell does this happen? I've been trying, I keep telling people, like, go on there and buy it because there's some short story book with a dog on the cover that's beating me out in the bestseller. And they got that little fucking banner that says bestseller and just like get us up there to number one. I just want the banner. That's it. I don't care about anything else. I want to say that I had a number one bestseller on Amazon for my first book. Go figure.
Yeah, that's so awesome. That's definitely a feat to be proud of because I mean you're competing with probably thousands or tens of thousands or millions of people, and literally just releasing it. Like that's you got to pat yourself on the back for that one.
Dude, it's crazy. Like I was looking through the listing, and fucking Mario Puzo is below me.
Wow.
It was like what? And then I was looking in like the true crime space, and I was six down from John Grisham's new book, true crime book that he just put out. And I was like, how is this possible? And then I was looking at all the rankings because Catherine just put out a new book too. And I was looking, I'm like, all right, where's she at? Where am I at?
That's so awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely unique and not something that I ever expected. It's funny because a little bit more back history to the book itself. I was not going to publish it the way that I published it. I was going to self-publish, just like Killers has always been self-published. I was just going to throw it up on Amazon and let them do all the fulfillment and whatever, you know. And then I was talking to EJ, and EJ Hammond
Right.
wrote the foreword for my book. She is uh, the Bundophile. I always say it wrong, and she corrects me all the time. But I like the way I say it because it sounds dirtier. But anyway, uh, but she wrote the foreword, and she wanted to read through the whole book first. And I was like, okay, cool, read through it. And so she read through it, and she said, Jeff, you have got to submit this to like a regular publishing house because they will pick it up right away. Like hit up a couple of the true crime publishers, they will pick it up immediately. And I kind of laughed at her and I was like, all right, whatever. We'll see what happens. So I did. I submitted it to three publishers. Out of those three publishers, two of them were bullshit. They were just vanity presses that wanted to charge me $600 to $1,400 to publish my book. And EJ was like, she warned me ahead of time. She was like, Jeff, don't pay for anything. Uh, you should never be paying for your book if you're going to publish it. They should either be paying you or they should be fronting the bill for everything. I said, okay, cool. And then I submitted it to Wild Blue Press, who is my publisher, and they did exactly that. Right? They loved it from the very beginning. They picked it up, and I just got an email that on the 5th, Goodreads is going to be running a giveaway on there, and so you can win a copy of the book or whatever, but it's going to be the whole month from July 5th to August 4th. So that's going to be coming out. And I was like looking back in the history and like the other books that were like last month got 34.5 thousand submissions into winning a free book. So like I'm interested to see where I'm going to fall in that. And I'm glad that they seem to have enough confidence in what I've written and what we've put out that they think that it can fall right in line with all of the others. So that's kind of cool to see that. because I'm sure that they want it to look really good because that helps them out too, you know?
Right. That's so awesome. That's so cool. I'm sure you got to be really proud of yourself for that.
Yeah, I don't think it's all set in yet. Uh, I keep looking at it and I'm like, is this for real? Like, how did this happen? Like when because these little banners pop up when you go to your Facebook or your Amazon listing. And like it popped up and I looked at it a bunch of times, but there was never any banner there. And then all of a sudden I clicked on it and it said hot new release. What the fuck is that? So I clicked on it and it was like, you're number one. I was like, number one. And I'm like running around showing it off. I'm like, how did this happen? But I mean, I'm glad, but I just like, I had no idea. Uh, And I mean, again, it ends up being the strength of, what they're doing as a publisher, what I'm doing going out there. And I'm sure that it helps that I'm at, you know, 30 conventions a year. I'm constantly in front of people. They're constantly getting to talk to me. I'm constantly pitching the book and the game and everything else that I'm doing. So I think it really helps to hit it from all ends. And that is obviously coming out now. So it's cool.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, I sit there and I look and I see like you're doing so many incredible things. And I know that there's a bunch of stuff coming up on the horizon that you have coming, and it's incredible. And I'm so grateful that I get to be in the mix with everybody else, and that we're all doing all this stuff. And it's such a unique community, right? Uh, I don't think people understand how close a lot of us are. Like the true crime community, like the creators that are out there creating content and stuff, are a very tight knit community. Like we all know each other. We all share stuff all the time, back and forth. And I think it's really kind of cool to be counting in the middle of all of that. And I still feel like I don't know shit, uh, but apparently I do. Maybe I
Yeah, the
pretend.
community is amazing. There's so many people that I'm so close with and so many people that I'm still learning about, like I'm going to a podcast festival on Labor Day weekend called I think it's True Crime Northwest, and it's in Portland. It's at Sheraton. I don't know if I'm saying that right, PDX, and there's going to be different, Pacific Northwest podcasters there, and I'm like excited to do that. I might be doing a panel of doing a live interview with a spree killer out of Indiana, which I'm hoping that they'll allow me to do. But if not, it'll still be cool to be there. But yeah, I'm still getting my feet wet with conventions and festivals and stuff like that. I'm kind of a shy person, so I don't really like public speaking. So I'm kind of building myself up to do that with smaller ones, and then I'll eventually get up to bigger ones. My ultimate goal is to go to CrimeCon next year, which I just submitted my email to them to see if I can be an exhibitor there, which if that's the case, then that will be amazing, because I've always wanted to go to CrimeCon too as an exhibitor. But if I can't, then I'll still go there and meet people and network and stuff like that.
So we may see each other there because I signed up last year. I actually did a couple different things. I signed up for a booth last year, but you know as well as I do that that shit ain't cheap. And I was like, maybe I'm not going to exhibit there because I don't know that financially I could do it right now. But I also very very late in the game. Again, EJ is the one that kicked me in the ass, and she was like, "Jeff, you should exhibit or you should apply to be a speaker." And I'm like, "No way, man!" Like Douglas is up there, and Catherine is up there, and all of these other people. I'm like, "There's no way." Like I don't. So they got back to me at the end of last year or before this last convention, and they were like, um, so EJ was telling me I should do that. And so I did, and they got back to me and they said, "Hey, we're already full this year. The schedule is already out. We are really interested in that. Like, make sure you submit early for next year, and we'll see if we can't get you in. And so, literally, the day that they opened up the submissions, I put my name in. So maybe there is a chance that I will be on stage next year speaking at CrimeCon, which is actually better because now I actually have some like acumen behind me with the book, and the success that it's having will be a good little piece that I can push out there to be like, hey, all you guys on ID that like those ratings, like I got a book that's really popular right now. How about you put me on stage? I'll talk about
That's so cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that I get approved for CrimeCon, but I guess I did submit a little late. I didn't realize that you have to sign up super early, just like the oddities expos, that tour the US.
Yeah, yeah, it's you know, and I don't know what that looks like as far as exhibitors, because honestly, I think that a lot of exhibitors end up because the cost there is extensive, and so I think that keeps excuse me, a lot of the exhibitors away. I know a lot of the podcasters and stuff get in there. It's a different price point for you guys, and I'm not at a place right now because we're like I have one like show that's not really doing like is anywhere. I don't know where it's at. But I have that going. I have the possibility of doing another one. EJ and I are talking about doing a show together, which would be really cool. And so there is some crossover work that we're talking about. We're actually, I don't even know if I'm supposed to talk about this or not, but too bad. Uh, we are also working on a book together. So, and it's going to dig into uh, much more about childhood psychology, something that we're both very interested in. And so we've picked out a bunch of different serial killers that had very, very interesting upbringings, and we're going to talk about it and try to understand how that influences things later on for them. And so I think it's going to be fascinating. I think it'll be really cool to really kind of dig into that area because we know from psychology that everything starts when we're children, right? When mom and dad tell us that we're a piece of shit and that we're too
Mhm.
fat and we're never any good. Uh, People carry that around for the rest of their lives if they don't deal with it, right? And then we pick up relationships that reinforce that stuff, and then it just becomes that vicious cycle. So, like understanding like where the origins of some of these people started, I think is a very important place to really understanding them later on uh, as what they became. So anyway, I think it'd be really cool. And apparently, I'm relegated to talk about fish because EJ does not like Albert Fish.
I
Uh,
can see that. Yeah, not a whole lot of people like Albert Fish. I can totally
yeah,
understand why.
but hey, like you can't go wrong with somebody that's like eating like their own shit.
Right, right. Yeah,
You know,
exactly. I mean, that dude was definitely out there for being a serial killer. He was probably one of the most unique serial killers in world history, really.
his first kill was in my hometown.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so like yeah, there's something about it that apparently and I didn't talk about him in my own book. So yeah, uh I think it need the fish needs to come out. Need to take the fish out of the bowl.
Right, right. So to speak. That's funny. So to round us out, can you talk about where people can find your book and can you hold up your is it iPad or tablet and
It's
show the
my
cover?
it's flipping around. So there you go. There is Beyond the Headlines, True Crimes, Myths and Legends. And I got a couple cool Easter eggs. There we go.
Nice.
You can see the people on there. And so one of the things, of course, we've got Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, H. Holmes, and Dennis Rader on the cover. My buddy Kenny, who oddly enough just called me, is the one that did all the illustrations for that, Kenny Baker. But I sent it to Dennis, right? I sent him the cover And he was like super excited because, and this was not done intentionally. This was something that the publisher put together, and it just happened to be happenstance that it happened this way. But Dennis is right next to H.H. Holmes, and he was very, very excited that he was put next to his idol,
Hmm.
because that was Dennis's favorite killer, was H.H. Holmes. So he is literally positioned right next to him. So there you go. There's a little Easter egg for the book. I also tried to do something else really fun, and they did not include it in the final print run, or at least I don't have the final print run yet. I mean, I have the ebook, but it's not in the ebook. But I sent them a picture of me in Dahmer's glasses to put on page 213. And the girl who was in charge of everything like loved the idea, and I don't think it made the final cut, but I was really hoping that they would do that because I thought it'd be so funny if people would like get the joke
Right.
on page 213, right? I thought it'd be really cool, but I don't think it actually hit it. Sad. I might have to create like bookmarks of that like when I give it to people at the shows, I put into page 213.
Hmm.
I think that that would be funny, but that's my own dark sense of humor. But you can get the book on Amazon. It's on there right now. The hardcover, the paperback, the ebook are all on there. It will be about a month or so before the audiobook comes out because they still have to get somebody, a voice actor, to do all that stuff. And so that'll be coming in the next month or two. Uh, I'm assuming since it's going on Amazon, it will also hit Audible because that's an Amazon product. So I'm pretty sure that it'll end up on there. On top of that, as soon as they get it into our distributor, it will be up on barnesandnoble.com, as well as Books a Million, I think, also uses the same distributor. I think it'll be up on their website. And then I am currently in the midst of everything else that I'm doing, as I am going to conventions, I have set up some book signings and stuff to different cities that I'm going to. And so there may be some of those coming to a city near you, as well as I am looking to get some of those books into like physical copies into some of these different stores. So different booksellers and stuff that will end up carrying it. Some of your local oddity shops will have it because I'm pretty close to a lot of those. And so there are several people that are already like asking to carry it. So I'm just waiting for the distributor to drop and for them to get all of the information up there so that I can release that to those people and they can go purchase the books. So that's going to be coming really soon. And I'm really hoping that with the success that we're having right now, that Barnes and Noble will pick it up as physical copies and not just on their website with the option to order at the store, but they'll actually carry physical copies in the bookstore. So I'm hoping that I can get that done. They showed some interest when I talked to them, and so I'm hoping that it works because that would be huge.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be awesome. Definitely let me know when you come to Washington State, whether it's Spokane, Seattle, Tacoma. I'll definitely show up and we can hang out and swap stories.
Absolutely. I have never been in. I've never stepped foot in Washington yet. I've been to California, I've been to Nevada, but I've never been to Washington. And so I've always wanted to go there. I think it'd be super cool. And then, Robert Lee Yates, when
Hmm.
you flip through the world of serial killers, he is the last killer in there. And so, like, of course, he's from Spokane. And so I've always kind of wanted to go up there and see that area. It'd be interesting to go up there. I've just never been there.
Yeah,
So,
Washington is so
down.
beautiful. When once you come here, you definitely won't want to leave. The water and the forestry and I mean, we're the evergreen state for a reason. I mean, it's just so beautiful here and but I mean, we get so much rain every year. You can understand why the suicide rate is so high and we produce so many like serial killers. It's because it's depressing sometimes, but it's beautiful, on top of all of that.
Yeah, yeah, amazing.
Well, I won't keep you any longer. I thank you for your time today, and I thank you for, talking about the book and myths and legends. And this was really interesting and fascinating, and it's always great to talk to you. I think you're in my top five now. My top five is Dr. Ramsland, Dr. Burgess, Dr. Picado, Dr. Stone, may he rest in peace, and now yourself.
Yay. Well, I appreciate that, man. It's always good. I always enjoy talking to you too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll be in touch, okay?
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Awesome.